Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at a simple question, and it's this: where do you want to go to church? Or perhaps a better question, in light of the fact you're watching this online, what does church look like to you? Perhaps it's a question that a lot of us have been asking ourselves since we experienced almost 2 years without being able to meet during the COVID pandemic. For some, you may never have attended church, and these short videos have become a way for you to make a connection with us here at Dorchester Baptist Church. Well, over the next few weeks, we're going to take a journey through an account in John's Gospel. It's an account of just after Jesus' death. You could argue that this is the start of the church, and our story starts with the disciples, those that have given their lives to following Jesus. But they have just witnessed Jesus' execution. Their hopes of Jesus being the solution to all their problems seem dashed, and they now have to come to terms with the fact that he's dead, and they are alone. And not only are they alone, but they're also under threat because people knew that they'd been with Jesus. And anyone that had an association with Jesus was in danger of the same treatment that he received. So our account starts literally just after Jesus' death. And we read it in John 20, starting at verse 19. John 20:19 says, "On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, 'Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you.' And with that, he breathed on them and said, 'Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone his sins, they are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven.'" In this passage, we see 3 pictures, 3 illustrations of 3 types of church. And over the next 3 weeks, we're going to consider what I've called a tale of 3 churches. We start with this little group of 10 disciples behind locked doors. Welcome to Locked Doors Fellowship. These 10 disciples are together, and they're gathered on that first evening after Jesus' death. But notice that they're huddled behind a locked door for fear of the Jews. The situation doesn't look too good. But first, let's consider that this church has got some redeeming features. Firstly, everyone was there except for Thomas. Verse 24 tells us that he was the only one not with them. So 10 out of 11 is not a bad turnout. So they are first committed to being together, and this is good. Secondly, they were all there before Jesus turned up. It's also a good thing. So they're together, fellowshipping, but they had a major problem. They were dominated with fear. They had locked the doors because they were terrified of what the Jews might do to them. How easy it is to lock the doors and huddle up and just want to stay safe. Most of us don't need to worry about the Jews or anything else for that matter. But it's very easy for us to become a part of Locked Doors Fellowship. And we can become part of Locked Doors Fellowship for far less obvious reasons. One reason that churches lock their doors is because often we as individuals lock our doors. We say, this is as far as I'm going to go and no further. Maybe we lock the door to certain people. Perhaps we tried letting them in once before and we've learnt what they're like. We've met their type and they were trouble. We can lock ourselves against discipleship. It was easy, wasn't it, when we first became Christians, but now we've been around a bit. It's just not so easy to be told what to do. It's not so easy to see the things that need to change in our life. The word disciple means learner. Winston Churchill once famously said, "Personally, I'm always ready to learn, although I do not always like being taught." Sometimes we may lock the door to the work of the Holy Spirit. Because often when the Holy Spirit is around, it doesn't fit our neat, nice, organised way of doing things. Some of us lock the doors because of sin. Times when God challenges us, that nagging feeling that there's things of our lives that we need to sort out. And yet it's just too hard to change. We're happy where we are. Some people lock the doors because of hurts. When they first became Christians, they were so excited, but then they got hurt. And maybe sadly they even got hurt by the way that other Christians treat them. How could they treat you this way? You want to be open and you want to open the door, but you're just too scared of getting hurt again. Maybe you've been hurt by unanswered prayer. You prayed maybe that someone would get healed and yet they didn't. Maybe you prayed that something would happen and yet it didn't. And so you're hurt and you've locked the doors because of those unanswered prayers. And it's just hard now to trust God. Hurt can hold us back for years and years. Keeping the doors locked, thinking at least that way we'll be safe. Or maybe we'll keep the doors locked because we've never met Christ before. Whilst we've heard about Christ, maybe even met a few Christians and they seem okay. But to open the door of our hearts to Christ, to fully acknowledge him and who he is, might just require us to let go and trust. And that's not easy. To accept Christ, maybe for the first time, feels like too big a step. So church number 1 is Locked Doors Fellowship. And it's easy to become part of that church. Many of us has been there at some point. Some of us still go occasionally. But today I want to tell you that there's some good news. Jesus is so committed to the church. Jesus is so committed to us that even locked doors don't stop his plans. In our passage we see that he comes marching in, he walks through those doors that they've locked to be with the disciples, to be with his friends. In fact, he is so committed that he's even given his life for the church. That's his commitment. It was only that morning that he rose from the dead. For many of us, just rising from the bed takes most of us energy. But Jesus is so committed to the church that he's risen from the dead. And he's been on a long walk and he says, I'm still going to be there for the evening meeting. Jesus turns up even though they'd locked their doors. So let me ask you this morning, have you been to Locked Doors Fellowship? Most of us have at some point. And for whatever reasons we've locked the doors, but no matter how the doors have been locked, like the physical doors in our passage, Jesus can always come and be with us, be amongst us, and allow us to experience something of his presence, that we don't have to stay in Locked Doors Fellowship any longer. And next time we're going to consider our second church. Our second church is a glimpse of what it is like when Jesus comes. And no matter how often or how long we've been a part of Locked Doors Fellowship, when Jesus comes, everything changes. Hopefully you'll join me again next week as we look at our second church. Have a good week.